For the one who gathers us in and who sends us out. Again and again in that rhythm, you pull us together to listen for your spirit, to be nourished by the good company around us, and to receive grace that we didn't even know we needed. And then you send us out into the world to be that grace for others. So we pray that in our time together this morning that you would be active among us, noticeably present, that your spirit would move and inspire and clarify and help us to see and hear one another, and to discern well your call for us. Bless us in this time. We pray it in Christ's name. Amen. All right, friends, we have a tight timeline, so I'm going to jump right in, and I scripted myself to keep myself to a certain amount of time. So forgive me, I'm going to mostly read. Also, I'm just out of words. So in 2022, we decided, does anybody remember 2022? That was a while ago. We decided that we needed to address the urgent need to restore this sanctuary building. So I am kind of laying the groundwork for how we got to where we are right now today, what we're talking about. So we decided to address that urgent need to restore this sanctuary building. And as we entered into that project and the cost of that overall project became clearer, especially early last year, early 2024, the changing economics of church have helped us to understand that we have this opportunity to make a really strategic move by considering the redevelopment of the remainder of our property, not including this building. So does that make sense that we basically said, once we recognize, oh, this many $1 million, how about that? That kind of led us to think, how are we going to manage and maintain our other facilities if we already know this is already going to cost us this much? We need to actually, we kind of got nudged, shoved into a more creative space, right? And so churches everywhere are doing that, are asking those questions about their property. What makes our process more unique is that we are doing this from a position of much greater abundance than many churches. Rather than approaching this as a last resort, we have this vibrant congregation and we have a vital mission in this place, in this community. We are not hanging on by a thread like many churches are who, when they reach the point of being open to considering something different about their property assets. So this is not just a last-ditch effort to make a faithful decision to repurpose our property. This is how can this actually nourish and feed our mission. And so we convened the Master Plan Discernment Team, which we, around here, we affectionately call the MDT. More acronyms, I know. So that convened last fall. And as that team began this work of discerning what does it look like for us to seek partnership for the redevelopment of our property, aside from the sanctuary building, we were seeking to answer questions about what kind of space we need. Okay, so what if we were to redevelop our property, what are the things that we would need to be built into those possibilities? And so as we began that work and we tried to answer those questions about, well, what sort of space do we need for the church, we quickly recognized that we needed to do some deeper, more missional discernment work as a congregation in order to answer those questions really well. So we realized just how tempting it is to believe that our primary objective in development of new revenue, it's tempting to believe that our primary objective is the development of new revenue streams, right? That the whole reason we're doing this is in order to provide new revenue for the church. That is a temptation. And so it's to say we need a revenue stream in order to maintain the facilities. But we have to back up from there and ask, well, for what? Why do we need to maintain the facilities? Why do we need to do that? Why do we need to do that? If you keep kind of like a 4-year-old asking why and why and why and why to each question, then it leads you to much deeper questions about purpose and mission, which is where we need to start. And so we recognize that that's the work that we need to kind of recenter on. It's visioning work, which is iterative work. It's work that we kind of come back to again and again as the world changes and we change and the community around us changes. We have to come back and say, okay, what have we learned so far in these last few years? What do we know now? And how do we hear God guiding us differently in this time? So we recognized it was time for us to do that. It was time for a new iteration, if you will. And so we put a pause on the master plan discernment team work in order to engage this new round of visioning. And today, our vision team is reporting out to you, sharing what we have done and what we have learned, what we're in the middle of right now, and where we're going next. So we have some great members of this team who are ready to share with you this morning. I'm going to turn it right over to John Grimshaw. Oh, I have the mic right here for you. Sorry, you don't get hands-free.
No problem. Hey, everybody, I'm John Grimshaw. And like the 4-year-old, when I was invited to be part of this committee, it was kind of a why? And I've really enjoyed getting to learn more about how this fits into the larger master plan conversation, and excited to share a little bit of that context with you, some of the work that we've done. So I've got my paper here especially for the names. I don't want to get anyone's name wrong. So the team, the vision team, is Jan Berger, Keith Berner, Bergen Casey, Casey Crisp, myself, Davis King, Brooks Schulke, with Henry Joyner helping us out in a consulting role, as well as the senior staff leadership, Emily Buchanan, Rachel Wright, and pastors Kathy and Taylor. So we've got a great group together, and we're trying to step back, like Pastor Taylor said, and really figure out what are our principles. There's a lot of documentation, actually, that already exists that some of you know and some of you don't, to help define the mission and the principles and the vision. But there's so much of it, and we really need to kind of cut to the heart of it to help us strategically guide this process of the master plan. And so that is what the vision team is doing, is really defining those guiding principles and helping us figure out what are they, and then how do we integrate those into our daily life, into the practices of our church, and ultimately into the decisions we make about the facilities. So it's been a multi-step process, as most processes are. And it started with some internal work for the vision team. And spoiler alert, it will turn around to some internal work for all of you over the summer. But we'll get to that in a second. So we read through some documentation from the church, some kind of big statements, reactions to things that have happened in the last, 10 years. Time is going very, very fast. But think about what have we done and where are we going? And one thing that I specifically noted, I'll call it to you, is there's actually incredible internal consistency between where we all landed as a vision team and what we've been saying for the last 9-10 years or so, looking at the state of the church when Pastor Taylor took over, a summary of a conversation with something like 200 people, really, really great consistency. So I think the beautiful part is a lot of this work has already been done, and we are just crystallizing it into clear language to help guide the rest of it. But we read through this documentation, and the other kind of key part of it was working with external organizations, because it's really easy for us to take, well, maybe not easy, but it's a natural process to take what you already know, what we've already put together, and use that to make a decision. But we have to think about the changing external environment, because that's kind of what led us here, right? The changing external environment of this building was a big driver of this reflective thought. And so we don't want to get caught unawares again. We want to look at the broader understanding of what's changing politically, what's changing socially, what's changing in the community, in the environment, in the climate to some degree, to help us see where the puck is going. I don't think I've ever watched a hockey game in my life, but that is just the stickiest way to think about it. So talking to all those groups, I don't know, I think we've interviewed 15, 16, something like this at this point, so brought a lot of great context in. We met up as a vision team on a Saturday and pulled together this internal documentation, our own personal reflection, and all of this insight and wisdom from all these great organizations. The mayor, I read through this list, and it's not coming to my mind right now, but there's a lot of really wise organizations. I know I talked to Methodist Health Ministries, so really, really wide, disparate groups to figure out not just who we are, but who we are and how we live this, and what decisions we want to make today and 5 years from now and 15 years from now to support our community and adapt to the changing environment. Part of this, of course, is how do we work with communities like the homeless, maybe some underprivileged and underserved groups. Part of it is thinking about what does it mean to be a downtown church, right? We are in a very unique location for a church in general to be right next to the capital of one of the biggest states. It gives us a lot of potential to be a really strong arm for good. As we've seen, I think especially in the last year, some amazing opportunity to host and engage groups, translating that to thinking ahead. How do we do more stuff in that same vein? So with those interviews, with that internal meeting, reviewing that documentation, we sat down and really thought about what we think it is to be a member of First United Methodist Church, and where do we feel like we should be going? Where do we feel like we should set our heels in to define this vision, to really nail down what the work is, to give clarity so that we know we can say this, hey, this is how we show up every single day as a member of this church, to give a strong anchor to the master plan discernment team and to the entire congregation. It's not just in service of this larger work around figuring out the facilities piece. That's obviously a huge part of it. It's also, what is the terminology, the language you get to use every single day, every single week when you go out into the community and act as a light and a guiding voice to pull people to the church, which I think is really helpful because it's always, well, I don't know your lived experience, but people are maybe a little less receptive than they've been in the past, and so having a nice, clear vision and mission and description to take out to the community, to pull them in, I think is really wonderful to have. And so we're at kind of our midpoint, where we finished, I wouldn't say all, but a lot of our pre-work, sitting down, pulling this language together. We're going to hear about a little bit of that in just a second. And so now is the place where we check in with all of you at today's meeting, and in a broader sense, start to pull feedback from all members of the congregation to have you go through the similar process we did and share, what do you think it means to be a member of FUMC? What do you think are the pressing issues? Where do you see us going in the next 5 to 10 years? And to integrate the pre-work we did, the feedback you all give over this summer, and the insights we got from external sources to really help set a clear vision path moving forward. So that's kind of where we are today. And next we're going to hear from Bergen about some of the language that we've got, because there is, like I said, this beautiful, rich tapestry of language and principles and all the stuff that we have that guides us that we don't see every single day. So it was a great exercise to have this in front of us, and I think it's a really wonderful one as we get into kind of thinking about this for you all to see it as well.
Good morning. So I want to start by thanking you all for filling out the survey. It was a survey sent out over a month-long period, and it was talking about vision and values, and that's what I'm going to summarize for you today. When Taylor first got here 10 years ago, many of us went through the exercise John was referring to, and we talked about who we are, and we redefined our mission statement, and we drew up our value statements, and I guess that's not on the slide. Okay. Yay. Okay, so let's refresh. We refined our mission statement to be, we believe, First United Methodist, is this a trick? We believe that every person is a beloved child of God. We believe that every person is on a journey to God with God. We freely admit that we do not have all the answers, but we believe that Jesus points the way. When we practice genuine hospitality, engage in heartfelt acts of service, advocate on behalf of the powerless, and excluded and embrace the gifts of people from different backgrounds and experiences, the church becomes the authentic expression of God's unconditional love for us all. And so we honed that language in, and then we talked about our values, and we have 6 value statements. Okay, so this is our mission. First United Methodist Church exists to build a community where all people are invited to know God's love and sent to join God in transforming the world. Then our 6 value statements include justice, bridge building, storytelling, active learning, service, constructive disruption. Those are 6. And so we sent out the survey, and we were pleasantly surprised to know that a lot of the survey questions were consistent with our original vision and values. So we've been following a very similar track for 10 years, and this sort of reinforces what we already know about this congregation and what is important to us. The survey results do show deviations and elaborations related to where we want to go, and that's really the point, right? So we can't be stagnant. What we don't want to do is be the same church today that we will be in 20 years. So as John said, it's not just about changing the facilities and making the structure more modern and more accessible. That's all great, and that's where we're going. But we want to make sure that what we do as a church and how we live out that vision and how we live out that mission and values also evolves over a period of decades. So thank you all who's filled out the survey. You all have a 3-pager, 4-pager that I have not looked closely at. So I'm not going to read what you already have, but I sort of went through and came up with my own sort of summarization. This church continues to have a desire to stay rooted in traditional worship. We're not a sort of interdenominational megachurch, but we are looking for ways to modernize and to change the worship and continue to make the worship more invigorating for different generations. We continue to like and want more ways to learn in small groups and to grow in our individual faith. And small groups across interests, so not just age, but we have something like 26 zip codes represented in this church, and we have seen in these surveys a desire to continue to meet new people, and sometimes the best way to do that is not in service, but in small groups. Continue learning. This is a church that really wants to dig deep and ask tough questions. We're not really into superficial worship, or we might be going somewhere else. We're not afraid of the hard questions, and we want to continue to ask those questions. We are a church that has a leadership that listens to us. It's a leadership that believes in transparency and discernment. We don't make decisions behind people's backs. We don't have closed votes. A lot of people have thought over the years that we sort of agonize and we talk things ad nauseum, but really part of that process is to make sure that we are, a united voice that hears multiple voices and then sort of comes to a conclusion. We are a church that believes strongly in advocacy and connecting God's work to government action. Not just by virtue of our location, but we are trying to live out God's word through public policy and advocacy and making sure that laws are changed that reflect what we believe is a Christian message. We believe in expanding our reach and inviting new people. This is also a weakness of the church. People come to us because they like the message, but we don't necessarily go out and actively sort of bring people into the fold, and there seems to be a desire to expand the demography of our church and to make sure that we're more inclusive. We're right now fairly white and fairly privileged, and so the thought is let's invite more people into the fold. There's certainly a need to be using our facilities more for public good as well as private use. There's ways to monetize what we have, and certainly if we do end up rebuilding, there are opportunities to pay for some of that expense. But the thought is, and I think we've done an exceptionally great job the last 2 legislative sessions, but we do open this church up to community groups who are lobbying across the way. But there is sort of an infinite number of possibilities that we could use our facilities for. And then lastly, and this is a big one, and that is financial sustainability. Yes, it's important to grow and to plan for the future, and to build new facilities, but it's also as important to keep up our facilities and to we put our money where our mouth is when it comes to mission work. That's quite clear. But we also need a facility that is well maintained and accessible and appealing to folks who want to join. And so the thought is, let's not keep living month to month, year to year, but really start planning for the future and making sure these facilities are as vibrant as the congregation. Is there anything I missed? Okay, thank y'all. Oh, I'm inviting Jan to the podium.
When you do visioning, it's really important for you to look internally to know who you are, so you know kind of what your mission and your principles are. But it would be incomplete if you didn't do an external bit of research to kind of see what's going on around you and where do we live and what are the needs. And so, as you have heard, we did the internal review, and it's so consistent about what we believe, and that's great courage for us as we go forward. But we also did an external review. We brainstormed as a team a list of community leaders that we thought might have great insight and be able to tell us what's going on in Austin and what the needs really are and how can churches be part of that. And so I think that there is a handout that is available. I see some of you perhaps with that. I do encourage you to get a copy of that and read that. I'm not going to read all the things that are listed in the executive summaries there. I just want to raise some of the themes that have come out that were mentioned more than once. And it's amazing the consistency across the board that you will find. One of the first things is about housing, either transitional housing and affordable housing. For downtown folks that are particularly in the service communities, our teachers, our firefighters, our nurses, the police, and so there's a great need, and our seniors, for all kinds of housing, but affordable housing is one. Transportation is a huge issue, and with all the new things that are proposed for the light rail right out in front of our steps, one street over, to say nothing of the potential changes that would be happening to I-35 and the downtown corridor, transportation is really key. It could affect how people come from outside of the downtown area in to access us, access other activities going on, and so it's something we need to be of. I'm turning in and out. Also, education is a huge issue, and it's every kind of level. We do our own kind of interactions with Pickle Elementary and certainly with Houston Tillotson, but UT has needs. Apparently, there have been times when students from the film department of UT have wanted to come and do filming in our building. And so there's any number of ways that we could enrich the education arena. Certainly there is a funding gap that's beginning to materialize, where some of the real intense programs for children, like music and art, are beginning to be eliminated. And so there's a potential for us to be advocates for those programs, either in giving hands-on service to that or partnering with other groups that do that kind of work. I think as we continue to look at these needs, some of them, they're global needs, and not one entity can be the solution for the problem. And so I think we're talking about partnering with people, but we're also talking about doing some things here, but maybe doing things off-site or in some other location. So we're trying to think about all the possibilities that might occur. Healthcare and mental health issues are certainly major issues. Issues for children and for families, how they function in downtown, how they function in our community, and what bridge can we possibly be. The arts are another area that this is a perfect location for performing events. We have all kinds of music, artistic expression, whether that be in performance or whether that be in lecture, whether that be in collaboration with exhibits. There's all kinds of potentials, and downtown is shy of having space to be able to do things like that. I'm looking for it here, trying to read through here. So I do encourage you to read this list. We certainly had people reference the value that FUMC brings when we are collaborating with other people and in our advocacy work. And we've certainly been doing a lot of advocacy. Excuse me. And so the recognition from those outside our community to say, you guys are doing a great job, keep it up. And I will conclude just going through this list by saying I'm the one that had the chance to visit with the mayor, and that was the first thing he said to me was, you guys are doing such a great job and have such a presence, and we're so grateful that you've made the commitment to be downtown. And you're in a unique place because not all downtown faith communities are as vital as you all are. And you are active, and you've got energy, and you're asking these questions. And that's a huge part of being a presence in the community. So we have all of these needs. And so now what do we do with it? And so we are inviting you in this process, in our visioning process, but the process for the church, to participate in some exercises, playful exercises this summer, to engage in sandboxes or brainstorming sessions that can begin to take an issue at a time and say, what are the possibilities that we can do? Who can we be? How can we do God's work in this mission at the corner of 12th and Lavaca? And so that's kind of our focus right now, to begin to brainstorm. This is one of the times that we are not having constraints of, do we have the money? Do we have the staff? Do we have any of those things that kind of put parameters on how we dream? We don't want to think about that right now. Not that we won't think about that should we choose to do some of these things, but we want to think broadly and big. We want to have big ideas, but we also want some specifics in those ideas so that we can begin to kind of see where the trends are, how we can be a player, who we might collaborate with in the community so we can actively be engaged in working on the problems that these needs represent. And so that's kind of our process. We'll be doing these exercises in small groups throughout the summer. We encourage you to invite your Sunday school classes to do that, your book groups, your reunion groups, whatever small groups you're a part of, and that we will collect all the data and then pull it back for the visioning team to look at. And here's the connection that has kind of helped me become clear and where we are in the process is if we begin to take the data that we're coming from all of these sandbox conversations, then the thing we might learn are who are the potential partners for us going forward. This could be a great way to identify who the players really are that might be part of our redevelopment work. And the other thing, it could also give us a good sense of, not a good sense, it could give us a glimpse of what kind of space we need if we were to do some of these programs. Do we have the right kind of multi-use space? That was something the mayor said we really needed. Do we have that kind of space? Or what other spaces might be needed in a redevelopment project that could help us implement the things that are needed right at 12th and Lavaca? So that's what I think I know. And who am I handing off to Rachel?
Well, and I'm just here to say that as we play in the sandboxes over the summer, there are representatives from the vision team and the master planning discernment team that are in most of the small groups that are active in the church. So you may take and run with it when you leave today, but if you don't, or if you need help figuring out what does it look like to play in the sandbox, I've had little kids for a really long time, so I'm here to help you all this summer, and I'm one of the FUMC staff members who won't be on renewal leave, so I'll be here to help you. So please feel free. I will be, if you didn't get a handout today, know that I'll be sending an email, probably not until tomorrow, with a link to the recording of this for those who weren't able to be here, along with links to the documents that we handed out today so that you can have those in another form, even if you got the paper version. So I'll be doing that, and I will also be happy to talk with you at any time about how to schedule a sandbox conversation or what that looks like, any questions you might have. So now we're ready for Q&A, but that's probably not going to be me.
I think what I'd like to do is hand this off to the three of you, just and I will take my attached microphone and bring it around to people who have questions, because since we are recording this, we want to make sure we actually capture what you say in your question, and then these folks can be the first line of defense to respond, okay? If you need me, I'm here. Who has a question? Nothing. We were perfectly clear. We covered everything that you've ever wondered about. I'm coming, Kat.
I'd like to hear more about the sandbox process and what that entails, and maybe get an example of one sandbox activity.
I know I'm taking this. I don't know whether that's a good idea or not. The process really is to convene a small group, and we have done it in a group of, maybe 6. We've done it with a group of of 12. So it's something that is eminently possible with a Sunday school and class. And then it's to take one issue, one need that we've identified, like education or the arts or whatever, and have a discussion about, okay, if that's the need, what are the possibilities? Just what are the possibilities that we might do specific kinds of things? And so with the arts, for instance, we could create performance space. We could have art exhibits. We could do interfaces with young kids and art programs and whatever. And so it's a quick brainstorming conversation and documenting. It's not trying to eliminate any ideas. All ideas are welcome. And so it's not a matter of evaluating them. It's just to think as broadly as we can. And some of the things, as we have done these sandbox processes, we find that ideas that we have or possibilities that we have cover the arts, but they might also cover education, and they might cover something else. So they're not exclusive, but it's just a matter of gathering as much data and thinking as creatively. I mean, they really are fun, and they're energizing. And so when you start to begin to brainstorm, then it's amazing how it triggers about 17 other ideas for other people. And so I think that will benefit us. And then we can distill all this information once we've done.
Other questions? Yeah. I think Bergen will want to answer Stan's question.
So I think there are a lot of things on the table. All ideas are welcome. Is there anything that's off the table?
Boy, yeah, I'm not sure we get to be the true arbiters of that, but I think the idea of the sandbox play is that it's better to bring as many perspectives in as possible. So I don't think we're going to move the church. that one I think we can probably take off the table. But outside of that, I mean, it's really great to hear ideas, because while some things may be less feasible, we're talking about big changes, facility changes, perspective changes, new partnerships. So I think that it's better to think bigger and work backwards to how do you get there than it is to try to pick some arbitrary caps today. So I would say, in whatever level of authority I have to be giving this comment now, don't approach this from a constriction, restriction, limitation mindset. Say, what would you do if you could paint a brush and make anything? And those jumping off points may lead us where we're going, because the idea is, where do we want to be 20 years from now? We may not get there tomorrow, but to know what the big ideas are opens us up to finding that direction, because journeys start with the first step. Knowing that everybody wants this big picture change is going to help guide us. So I think it's less about what we can't do and more about the mindset of, what is the biggest, boldest, brightest dream we can imagine, and then we'll work backwards to feasibility from that.
I would also say that we need to be mindful of what aligns with who we are and our mission and our values, and that's why we did that deep dive in the internal things. And so we want to reflect our internal work in the outside world. And so I would think that maybe our ideas might be those that incorporate and align with those mission and values.
Right, that's how you really get to vision, right? It's the convergence of those two things. It is an exercise of calling, right? I mean, at the end of the day, God is at the heart of this, and God is the one who calls, and also who gifts, who has particularly gifted us in particular ways that we are now called to pay attention to as we consider, how do we live that out? What does it look like for a church that cares about and cares in a way that we do that is not the same as every church? So what does it look like when you put that church into the midst of the sandbox of education and say, play, build a castle, What does it look like? It's going to look different than a church, in Dripping Springs or something like that, right? So it is that convergence point of saying, who has God gifted us to be, and how does that point us toward who God is calling us to be, and how that gets expressed? Other questions? Yeah, Suzanne.
It seems to me that it would be helpful to have a list of people who could lead these sandboxes, and also a list of the topics. Yep. So that there's form to it.
Yes, and you will have that. That's what the staff, and particularly Rachel, is putting together for you, so that all classes will have a clear exercise to do. And then that's also why we've been practicing it with some of these groups, like the vision team, the master plan discernment team, so that they will have done it, some of them a couple of times, so they'll be ready to lead it for you.
I think she's volunteering.
Charlie. Can you just say it and I'll repeat it?
Yeah, my question is twofold. Okay, we do this exercise for sandbox. What's the next step after that? How do we take these ideas and do something with it? And sort of what's the timeline, let's say, over 2025?
Anybody want to jump in?
So we do
I'm supposed to repeat the question. Sorry. Charlie asked, we've got this sandbox exercise. This sounds great. But then what comes next? What do we do with that information? How does that get used and processed? And then what's a rough timeline that we're looking at?
I think that the sandbox things, we're focusing on kind of doing those over the summer and collecting that. And as I understand it, that raw data will come back to the visioning team for us to kind of look at and see what themes are there, and kind of pull out some of these additional ideas and see if there have been any other needs that have surfaced in the midst of it. But then I also see that information will be handed off to the master discernment team to go, okay, this gives us some idea about potential partners and potential space, and then the master discernment team can continue to take that in their process to see whether it's feasible for us to do some sort of redevelopment process in the future. And I think the timeline is for completion for the sandboxes at the end of the summer. So perhaps in the early fall, the visioning team will be kind of summarizing all of that and handing it off to the discernment team is what I think.
That sounds right to me. We will come back. We have a board meeting again at the end of the summer, and so we'll come back just like we're sort of opening this up with the board today. And actually, if you're on the board, the administrative board, we are going to be playing in the sandbox, in fact, today, and so you'll get to try that out. And then at the end of the summer, we will bring it back to the board. Essentially, somebody gave me the image this week of shaking the funnel, right? I think that's a helpful image that you know, we're throwing everything in this summer, but then we're going to shake it a little bit and see what has the weight, because you know, where are the convergences? Where are the places where there's enough overlap for us to say, we believe that God's Spirit is leading us here, and so we're going to take steps in this direction and continue to shake the funnel a little bit more and see where that leads. So we do hope that the master plan discernment team will be able to pick up the work that they had begun in light of this work this fall. Okay, I think I'm going to call it right there. It's 10:47 and we need to be ready for worship at 11 o'clock, but thank you for being a part of this time today and for coming to listen and being invested in the conversation. My last word that I want to say is really a reiteration of what I said a moment ago, that ultimately, this is God's church, and this is God's process. It's God's dream for the world that we want to be a part of, right? It's all God's sandbox. And so I would just encourage you to be in prayer for this process, to be listening for God's Spirit, so that part of what we want is not to answer these questions about what could we do with our own preferences and our own pet projects and our own things, but rather with a deep sense of the purpose to which God calls us and for which God is gifting us. And so I would just encourage you to be listening for God in the midst of this as we go through the summer. All right, I think that's all for today. Let's get ready for worship. Thank you.
Good job.